Welcome, Terminology students. So today, we are going to dive into a really fascinating and, a pretty complex topic, multiculturalism. Now, this is a huge part of your AMC program, and we're going to explore it together by looking at some really interesting documents.
So let's kick things off with this really powerful idea from our first source. It's arguing for a kind of union that's built on a single, superior ideal. You can already see how this vision of pure unity raises some big questions about how diverse societies actually work.
And that leads us perfectly to our main question for today. I really want you to keep this one in your head as we go, because this is exactly the kind of critical analysis you'll need for your exams. So, how do they handle this push and pull between one ideal and many different cultures?
Now, as you know, this topic fits right into your AMC program. We're in Theme 1, Faire, Société, which is all about how we build societies and live together. And our specific focus, our axis, is Unité et pluralité. You know, that constant, tricky balance between social unity and cultural diversity.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at a really clear vision of unity. Then, we'll get some key academic concepts under our belt. After that, we'll put the ideal and the reality head-to-head. And finally, we'll look at how you can build a great argument for the baccalaureate.
All right, let's get started. Part 1. We're going to dig into our first source, which puts forward this very specific idea for unity in the English-speaking world, what it calls the Anglosphere.
So this text, America Needs the Anglosphere, basically argues that countries like the UK, Canada, Australia, they're connected by more than just geography. They're bound by what the author calls a shared history and a common set of values, human rights, individual freedom. The argument goes that this union can be a really powerful force for democracy in the world. It's a very clear, very strong case for unity based on one shared heritage.
Okay, so we've seen the ideological argument. Now let's switch gears a bit and put on our sociologist hats. To really analyze this vision, to get under the surface, we need the right tools. We're going to introduce a key concept from social science that's going to help us unpack all of this.
And that key concept is acculturation. Now, this is the classic definition, going all the way back to 1936. It describes what happens when different cultures meet and interact over time. But I want you to focus on the very last part of that definition: subsequent changes in the original cultural patterns of either or both groups.
And this right here is the absolute key takeaway for our analysis today. Acculturation is not a one-way street. It's not just about a minority group changing to fit in with the majority. The definition makes it crystal clear. Change can happen in either or both groups. This idea that everyone is changed by the contact, that is absolutely central.
So inside this big idea of acculturation, you have different ways it can play out. Our bibliography points us to two really important terms you've got to know. First, there's assimilation. That's more of a one-way change. But then you have integration, which suggests something different, that groups can be full members of society while holding on to their own cultures. That creates a much more pluralistic society.
Okay, now for the really interesting part. Let's take our new tool, this idea of acculturation as a two-way process, and use it to challenge that vision of a single, unified ideal. This is where we really start our critical analysis.
So let's go back. Remember, that first source, its entire argument rests on this one foundational idea of a single, shared history. It's presented as something solid, something stable, the very bedrock of these nations' identities.
But our academic concept forces us to ask a really tough question. If cultures are constantly changing each other in this continuous two-way process, how can their history ever be singular? How can it be static? I mean, doesn't every interaction, every new person who arrives, add another layer to that story and change it in the process?
Now, let's add another layer to our thinking. This next idea comes from a totally different place. It's from a source about collaborative art, but it works as a fantastic metaphor for what happens in society.
This idea of a diffusion or confusion of authorship, it's just a perfect way to think about multicultural societies. It suggests that after a while, it becomes almost impossible to tell where one culture's ideas end and another's begin. Everything gets mixed together, identity is co-created. This speaks directly to the pluralité part of our axis, doesn't it? It shows the complex, messy, and often beautiful reality of it all.
Okay, so this kind of thinking, making documents talk to each other, using concepts to analyze ideas, this is exactly what the examiners are looking for at the baccalaureate. So let's quickly break down how you can structure this kind of analysis in your exams.
For both your written work and your oral exam, this is your secret weapon. It's a simple but super powerful three-step structure. First, you state your idea, your point. Then you back it up with a specific, short quote as evidence. And finally, this is the most important part, you explain how that evidence proves your point, bringing in those key concepts like acculturation to show you're really analyzing, not just describing.
And, of course, to really make your analysis shine, you need the right language. Don't just say the text says, level up your vocabulary. Use stronger verbs like posits, contends, or asserts. Using these kinds of words shows the examiner that you have a real command of academic English.
All right, let's wrap all this up. So what's the big takeaway from our discussion? Let's pull our findings together and give a clear answer to that guiding question we started with.
So what we've seen is that it's not a simple choice. It's not unity or plurality. The real story, the central dynamic of these societies, is the constant negotiation between these two powerful forces. They are always trying to find that balance.
And this is exactly why this topic is so incredibly relevant. This isn't just a theory from a textbook. These debates about history, identity, and integration are happening right now, in the news, in politics, in countries like the UK, the US, and Canada. The question isn't if cultures will change, it's how we manage that change.
And this leaves us with one last big question to think about. If building a shared identity really is a negotiation, a two-way process, then who gets to set the terms? Who has the power in that conversation? And that question about power and representation connects perfectly to other themes in your AMC program, and it's something I really want you to keep turning over in your minds.